The CPC meeting of Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. Would you read please?
We don't have to read anything,
The call, the notification?
just the recording.
Yeah.
Call to order, recording and taping notification. As required by law, the town may audio and/or video record this meeting. Any person intending either to audio or video record this open session is required to inform the chair.
Thank you. Okay, welcome guests. Anybody for public comment? Hearing none, moving on. Approval of the minutes of the CPC meeting, October 14th, 2021. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Done. Status reports on the Community Center Playground, Affordable Housing Trust, Part-Time Housing Coordinator, and the Judith Eldridge acquisition. Welcome.
Who is that masked man? Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having me here tonight, and I will start out with an apology. You do not yet have my written reports, but I assure you, because you have taken the step of recording this, I will commit everything to writing and submit it for the official record. I appreciate your indulgence. A little bit of a crazy week last week, however, I'm prepared to speak to everything you have on your agenda.
Okay.
What is your preference, Mr. Chair? I heard you say community center. That would be the Harwich Community Playground, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Would you like me to go straight
Sure,
in
go
order?
ahead.
Thank you.
At your convenience, Joe.
Thank you. Excuse me. Several positive updates, I think, on the Harwich Community Playground, which, as this committee knows, will be stationed right outside the Harwich Elementary School. In June of this year, the school district, the Monomoy Regional School District, informed me and the Finance Director, Carol Coppola, that the school district, through the Harwich Elementary School, was willing to make an additional donation, which was both timely and necessary and greatly appreciated. And that's because, as Assistant Town Administrator Megan Eldridge went through the procurement process, we were able to identify, even though we were working through the state bid list, which is the most expeditious and, in each case, least expensive option to go through, there would not be sufficient funding unless the school released what I understood was funds that were originally intended to be transferred over. Those funds of $25,000 were gifted to the town in August of this year and accepted by the Board of Selectmen. I would indicate that the funds were raised through community donations received for the purposes of building the new playground, and were received through and by the Harwich Elementary School and Harwich Elementary School PTO. And so again, it was a very timely and well-received gift. Based on that, we were able to proceed with procurement of equipment. I apologize, I'm going to avail myself of the copious notes written by our Assistant Town Administrator, who you'll hear me say several times tonight has done phenomenal work on procurement generally, but certainly in shepherding this project forward. The town went to bid. Invitation for bids for constructions were advertised in early June of this year with a bid opening of July 1st. The lowest bid for construction, with the inclusion of the price of the playground equipment and design services, exceeded the $500,000 appropriated for that original project, which necessitated the gift money being transferred over at that time. The town, through the Board of Selectmen, executed a construction contract and then were able to begin the process of obtaining the playground equipment. The process involved getting updated quotes and signed contracts for several vendors, and I'll go through those in a moment, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, to identify what was procured and at what level and what amount of discount we were able to achieve. Two of the three contracts required Board of Selectmen approval due to the size of the contracts being in excess of $50,000. The board executed those contracts on September 7th. At that point, we were confronted with the issue that everybody is dealing with in the known world, and that is supply chain issues and delays on purchasing. The normal delivery time frame for the playground equipment is 6 to 12 weeks, depending upon the type of equipment. However, the vendors had notified us, once we informed them of the results of the bid process, who the winning bidders were, that they were expecting delays based on manufacturing and shipping rates, again, related to the COVID pandemic and what's happening around the globe. For that purpose, the Assistant Town Administrator and I held a meeting with representatives of the design team, and the decision was made and signed off by me that given the combination of equipment shipping times and weather constraint on when the construction could begin on the final part, what's referred to as the poured-in-place ground cover, the decision is now to aim for a March 2022 start date for construction with a completion date of mid-June 2022. Again, the town was able to procure the equipment, the contracts have been placed, and the town will be able to receive the equipment and store it until construction is able to take place in March. I mentioned there were three contracts. The greatest contract was for $123,220.41. The winning bidder on that was for Childscapes, and their product is known as BCI Burke Custom Playground Equipment, and it is the majority of what you would consider to be standard playground equipment. Because the Assistant Town Administrator was able to locate these vendors on the state bid list or the state contract system, the town realized the savings through the state bid list discount of $8,137.57. Certainly no small amount and very helpful, where if we had simply relied upon vendors providing their quotes, we wouldn't have achieved that. So it's very beneficial for the town that we were able to find vendors that could meet the state bid list. The going in order of, a descending order of cost, the second playground group was, playground equipment bid was awarded to New England Recreation Group for a total cost of $71,217. And their equipment was the nautical-themed playground equipment. And the discount realized on that through the state bid list was $3,333. And last but by no means least, the playground equipment that was the bid that was won by Park Street Playgrounds LLC, in the amount of $24,084.32, was for some of the custom items, such as the custom boat-shaped accessible sandbox, musical shaped items, and things of that nature. And the discount realized on that through the state bid list was $1,897.68. So the overall recap would be the procurement process has gone exceedingly well. The design and construction contract has yielded positive results. And despite the hiccup of the pandemic, I'm personally pleased to be able to shoot for that March 2022 start date and a construction end date of when before school closes. So I'm envisioning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that hopefully a wonderful community event shortly after our town meeting to celebrate our newest community playground.
Joe, before we go any further, I'm going to open up to the board some questions on this particular project. And I have one, and I don't know if I'm recalling this correctly, and maybe some of the board members can help me. My understanding was that the school raised roughly $70,000 to contribute to this project 2 years ago. Did I get that number right?
I wasn't here.
I believe it was 70,000. Well, my question would be, if there's additional funding that they didn't use, shouldn't that go to the overall operations of putting the playground together?
It's easy for me to say, certainly. You know, I was the one that talked about this being a community playground. The town of Harwich is the procurer, the town of Harwich is the customer, if you will, of this process. And town meeting through CPC awarded money to the town. We know that the primary beneficiaries are the young scholars that are at Harwich Elementary School. But that's why I go through great pains to say that it is going to be erected on town property adjacent to the Harwich Elementary School. I will certainly follow up with Superintendent Carpenter, and probably more directly with his business manager, Michael McMillan, to find out what was raised by the PTO, the school, and what the district considers to have on hand regarding that, and report back out, and I'll update that to my report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but the overall point, Mr. Chairman, that I take is, yes, we would expect the funds raised for this playground to benefit the playground would be used on the playground.
And again, I could be incorrect.
Sure.
But that's what I'm basing the argument that that statement was made. Whether it was actually procured, well, whether it actually came to be or not, I don't have the answer to that question. But that was the number that I was led to believe.
I will certainly track that down, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I have, Secretary has done her due diligence. She has a number, I was incorrect. She has a number of $39,998.66 was raised, but they were doing additional,
Right.
They were
That's
still
the
doing a-
amount when they
right.
presented the project to the committee.
And but the 70 I'm coming up was in additional,
Sure, I can follow up with them and see what the status is.
okay, Jen, thank you.
I don't know, well, I can tell you I'm not aware of there were fundraising efforts. At the time they would have done them, I had an elementary school student, so I would have expected to been hit up, so to speak, but I'll certainly follow up with them.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me open it up to the board. Carol,
No questions, thank you.
Joe,
No, good report, thank you.
John.
I may have missed it, but did you include in your report what the currently projected total cost of the project is?
I did not, and I have not. I can run that through Munis and update that in my status report as to where we are. So we know that the original vote of CPC was the 500,000. We know that the 25,000 was augmented, and I'll be able to see if there was an additional. So what we presently have as funds available and what's been expended to date, and I'll add that to the report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
John, you're all set.
I'm all set.
Kathy?
Just a quick question. I wasn't here on the committee a year ago when they passed the playground application. Is it my understanding from what you just said that the playground is not going to be on school property? Is the one that was taken down, was that on school property?
So, no, the reality is that the agreement with Monomoy Regional School District is the town of Harwich is the landowner of the land around the school that extends through what we call the cultural center on that property. The building, I think, technically under the agreement is owned by the town of Harwich, as is the high school in that land. But it's understood that the school building is left to the school, but the surrounding environs are town property.
Okay, so that's what you meant when you said,
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
thank you, that's it.
Robert?
Nothing. Thank you.
I've got nothing. That was great. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Elizabeth. All right, moving on.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. What do you have next on your list?
Eldridge.
Affordable Housing Trust?
So with regard to updates, and I will share with you that this is my update as it relates to the Affordable Housing Trust, the monies that had been provided by CPC funds for the last several years. I think as you all know and have been seeing in both press reports, but also heard at town meeting, that the Affordable Housing Trust, under the leadership of Chair Donald Howell at the time, executed a land purchase through, and I will apologize up front, I'm taking great pains to not refer to the land as the Marceline project, and so I'm trying to change the narrative and refer to it as the Pleasant Lake Avenue land, and that's to honor the wishes of the family. But the town, through the trust, was able to acquire 6 parcels. The main entrance, if you will, sorry, I need to correct that so that people don't get the wrong understanding. The main gate that we use to access the property is on Pleasant Lake Avenue. I think many of you would also recognize it where you see a sign on Queen Anne, a local realtor that we all recognize who was instrumental in the deal. And it also causes me to tell you that the town is actively working to replace that real estate sign with an appropriate sign identifying that the land was purchased in large part through proceeds from the Community Preservation Committee. So, Mr. Chairman, we are working on getting that advertisement out there, and we're looking to do it both on the Queen Anne side as well as Pleasant Lake Avenue. And I do know that, looking in the direction to your membership on my left who joined us for the site visit, but I already forgot, I think it was late September, where we were able to have a site visit of many representatives of many committees. And so it's a very exciting time for the town, and that's town as everybody, as to what can potentially be done with that property as it relates to affordable housing. Additionally, as you may have gleaned at town meeting, the Board of Selectmen, under Article 12 of the special town meeting, is undertaking an eminent domain taking of what I call the missing tooth parcel. And when you look at the map of the area that was purchased, it's clear what was missing. The town understands that to be owners unknown, and so town meeting approved the acquisition of that. So in the end, we will have what I believe are 7 parcels totaling over 14 acres. And so it is an area that is has the great potential for a very positive impact on affordable housing. Now, I will tell you that as the current chair of the Affordable Housing Trust and as the town administrator, I bear the burden of being the wet blanket. And I say that because we, the Affordable Housing Trust, have had, I think, 3 meetings since the acquisition was completed, and 2 meetings since the, 1 meeting since the conclusion of town meeting. And I've had to remind the membership that we are not close to knowing what that property is going to look like and what sort of development is going to take place there. It's too early in the process. We need to acquire the eminent domain taking. I've been told by council that it's something that can be generally done from town standpoints fairly quickly. Fairly quickly does not relate to the general world, meaning it could take upwards of a year. However, the Affordable Housing Trust has already started reaching out to all the necessary professionals to take the next step. So we're going to be doing RFPs for engineering services, architectural services, and design. But more importantly, also starting to create community outreach events where, as we get into the darkness of the winter months, we know we're not going to be able to do what we did with the committees and have necessarily a site tour, although perhaps we could possibly do it on a Saturday. But we, the trust, will start reaching out to the general community and saying, what would you like to see here and what do you envision? So the great news is we have the land. The additional great news is we're going to add more to it. But we are in the very, very early stages of the process of developing that land. And so I just want to remind everybody through this meeting and other meetings that there are many steps to be taken and far greater community input before we really start putting plans to paper and paper to the general public.
Okay, I'll open it up to the board. Bob?
Yeah, so how much was spent on the land? Yeah,
Yeah, the purchase price of the land was $800,000. The Affordable Housing Trust, the last report I ran, I think expended an additional, I'm going to say $56,000 on professional services, the due diligence costs, if you will, the appraisal, the survey, some soil tests and things like that, and certainly for special counsel that was authorized by the Board of Selectmen. The latest balance that the trust has that I ran the other day in Munis, and that was intentionally a brag, I finally know how to use our fund accounting software system, is $416,000 and change. What I'm still trying to decipher is that a balance that relates directly to CPC funds? Because I do know that prior to my involvement with the trust, there are other minor sources of revenue, and so I'm not able to divine that from the report, so I'm still trying to ascertain how much of CPC related was expended that was accrued over the years.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, and you mentioned you're gonna bring in engineers, et cetera, to do some preliminary study of
Yep.
the use. And do you have a budget for that yet?
We don't. Really, what the trust directed me to do was start pricing out the RFPs, if you will, because I've told them for the procurement, I need to have what the trust considers to be the estimated value to
Right.
determine how the procurement would occur.
Right.
And we're going to get into that in our November meeting later this month.
Right, yeah. And just to comment, I know Millstone Brewster, I think that's been percolating for about 2.5 years.
Exactly,
3
right.
years, and that they're doing the site walkthrough tomorrow for all the bidders.
Right. So, thank you. Good to know. Mr. Chairman, if I could,
I'm curious, does the cell tower proceeds go towards
That's
the
what I
housing?
recall.
And if they were to do that,
so if I could answer, and I don't mean to say that only because I asked the same question and gave the same answer and was corrected. If the Board of Selectmen votes to release the funds and release them to the Affordable Housing Trust, was the answer that I was given. That yes, if that process takes place and the Board of Selectmen determine that the recipient of those, that revenue, which is meant to support affordable housing, is granted directly to the trust. It's my understanding, at least for this fiscal year, that exchange, that transfer has not happened yet. So yes, if that's what the board votes.
it has happened in previous years,
That's my understanding. I don't know that directly, but I've heard that.
and there's a number to that.
I would imagine there is, and I can research that number, Mr. Chairman. If I could, what I was gonna say additionally, the Affordable Housing Trust also directed me to, and I think some of you here are already aware of this issue, but to update the trust on their inventory of land. Well, the bad news is they don't have any land other than the property adjacent to Pleasant Lake. And so I'm working with council now for the deeds to be drawn up for the Board of Selectmen to transfer, if memory serves correctly, it's an additional 7 parcels that comport to the town meeting vote, 2019 under Article 61. And the purpose for that is the trust wants to contemplate whether there is, some of those could be sold and the proceeds used to benefit affordable housing. So the trust is actively looking at expanding additional revenue sources beyond what CPC has graciously requested through town meeting over the last several years. So we have cell phone revenue that we may rely upon, and I can validate how much that has been in years past, and update you if there's an additional transfer later this year.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
Is this the first part of your recap, or is this recap finished? Because I also understand there's a Sisson Road property but if they only have $400,000, how are they gonna build the property on Sisson Road?
So if Sisson Road is meant to be 265 Sisson Road, that's what's become problematic. That was one of the 7 parcels where the trust had been working over the last 2 years with the understanding that they had possession and ownership of it. We do not possess any parcels yet other than the 6 related to Pleasant Lake. And so I received an update from council this evening on several land matters, and she's already working on the deed conveyance. I'm hopeful that the deeds can be conveyed and recorded, certainly by the end of this calendar year, but more especially hopefully by early December of this year. But at present, the trust does not enjoy the benefit of care, custody, or control of that.
So once they get that, then, I mean, because I was originally told that was going to be built by the spring.
I didn't hear that last part?
Sorry. I was told that it was anticipated by members of the committee of the trust that project was going to be completed by the spring. So obviously, that's not going to happen.
I want to hold it for here. Elizabeth, does this deal with the CPC funding of that particular property?
Well, I mean, CPC funds
It's the only funding they have.
It's the-
funds the Affordable Housing Trust, other than the little money they get
I'm
from
not
the
talking
cell
about the
tower.
trust, I'm talking about this specific project. I mean, I'm hearing something a little bit different. All right, continue.
Well, I mean, the CPC funds the Affordable Housing Trust.
Right.
The Affordable Housing Trust supposedly had many irons in the fire. The purchase of the Pleasant Lake land and the building of housing on Sisson Road.
So one took precedent over the other.
That's not what I was told this summer. This summer, I was told that the Sisson Road project would be completed, that they already had the plans, they'd already had surveys, and that would be completed by the spring of '22.
I never saw any documents that came before this board.
No, it didn't come before the board. It was just,
That should have been an update.
it should have probably been.
All right, okay. I was lost there for a second. I didn't understand that piece of the equation. Go ahead, continue.
So I'm just, so that project is dead in the water right now.
If I may. First, I want to state for the record, I was not the member that gave that update, and nor did the member suggest I was, but I want to be clear about that. No, I had to bear bad news to the trust last week when I informed them that we do not have any other parcels under our care, custody, and control other than what was purchased this year related to the Pleasant Lake Avenue. That was obviously distressing to the members who have served longer than I because of the work that they had been working on for close to 2 years. However, at the risk of offending my colleagues on the trust, I can assure folks that we are not in a position to complete a project at any of those parcels and that timeframe whatsoever.
Okay. John?
Okay, I'm getting more confused rather than less.
I think I have that tendency. I apologize.
And so, but it's like additional information that just raises more questions. So my question is, I don't remember ever being informed, at least here, about any project on Sisson Road, except in gross generalities. So my question is, it sounds to me like the Housing Trust has been spending money on design for facilities on Sisson Road. And I'd like to see a report of what, I mean, I don't think we've ever seen any report of any expenditures from the Housing Trust, which is a gross oversight, I guess is the way I would put it. And I think we should be able to see a complete accounting of the money that the Housing Trust has spent. And I am assuming from this conversation that money has been spent on more than just the purchase of the Pleasant Lake property and other expenses related to the purchase of the Pleasant Lake property. And I'd like to know what those are and what remains as a result.
Joe, I'm going to lay it out for you. We weren't informed about a lot of things that should have come through from the trust before you took over. And that's why there was a push to get an internal person to help the trust.
You mean the coordinator role?
Yes.
I understand.
So it all kind of backed into each other.
Sure.
As you can tell from my demeanor right now, this board should have been informed, especially with CPC funding. So from here on out, I'm sure we're going to get the information we deserve,
Without a doubt, and
without executive session.
correct. And if I could respond directly to John's comments. First, to the information, you will absolutely receive full accounting of that. And I want to emphasize, not simply because you're community preservation, and I will say, and the majority of funds that I understand that have been expended came from CPC, but because it's the appropriate thing to do. This is town money through CPC and town meeting, and you'll absolutely get those reports. With regard to Sisson Road, I do want to emphasize, though, I simply don't know at this point if the trust was relying upon the funds that they did expend to Sisson, which I can explain in a moment, generally as I understand it, may have come from earlier transfers of cell phone tower revenue and things of that nature. Again, the reporting that I have access to doesn't delineate it that way. So I'm going to rely upon the accounting department and our finance director to get a full, complete reporting about what the revenue levels were, where they were determined from, and what was used for all of the expenditures. Because generally speaking, there haven't been a significant amount of them. It should be a one-page report. With regard to Sisson Road, I will back up and say that I have been on the trust since I was named as the acting town administrator back in November of 2019. However, for scheduling reasons, I think I participated in probably 4 or 5 meetings over the almost 2-year span until I was in absentia, put into the chair's role. I do know, however, that the trust reached out to me as acting administrator, and when town engineer Griffin Ryder was here, because they had received a report from Mass Housing Partnership relative to Sisson Road, and my understanding it was on next steps that should be taken. That was a report that was issued in January of 2020, but one of the agenda items we had last week was what next steps are we going to take, because nothing had been done since then. Part of the expenditures that would have occurred was a soils test that was done through Mass Housing Partnership, but paid for by the trust. I have not seen, nor am I aware of any design plans or construction plans, and the level of discussion at the trust recently, as we discovered the ownership issue and talked about beyond Pleasant Lake, what else are we gonna work on, was the understanding that we need to revisit what was done at Sisson Road, because it has languished for almost 2 years. And so, coming up 2 years in January. So the amount of expenditures is minimal, generally speaking, and I don't know that it was all derived from CPC funds, but to your first point and to your point, Mr. Chairman, you will receive a full accounting of all of that, and sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Joe. John?
And I'm all set, thank you.
Kathy?
I think that the lack of information, the lack of reporting over several years sort of is really shows a disrespect for the process that we've tried to put into place. We're supposed to make some intelligent conversation tonight moving forward about future funding, and we don't have any answers about the past funding. I actually had the occasion to attend many of the Affordable Housing Trust meetings or watch them. And yes, Sisson Road was one viable option, more so than all the other ones. And I think the understanding, at least from the public, was that it was moving forward at some pace. Okay, so one would assume that there might be some expenditures in some shape or form. And we've never seen that either. So it would be good to get something that, showed what exactly has been expended. I don't know. I'm at a loss for how we're going to proceed.
I'm not at a loss. This is very simple. The mechanism wasn't in place to get the information, to force the information.
To force the information.
Yeah, to force the information. Now, the administrator is in a position that he can provide the information that we need. Where we didn't have access, quite frankly, to you to get that information. And that's as kindly as I can put it. So,
May I, Mr. Chairman?
go ahead.
I appreciate you putting it that way, and I thank you for that kind way you said it. And to the membership, I've rolled out a new shtick, and I think, Kathy, you've heard it at some of the meetings. So I've reminded, and I try to do it in a, what's meant to be a humorous and disarming manner, that technically and legally speaking, I'm the new guy. For all the time, almost a year and a half, I served as the assistant town administrator filling an interim role. So I'm under contract with the town through the Board of Selectmen as of February 1st. And I emphasize that because I had talked to the board, both in public and not public, that I know that I can speak of now, that my mindset was I was in a caretaker role until they named a permanent administrator. Now, I need to work on that. There is no such thing as a permanent administrator. What I mean to say is somebody under contract. And so I purposefully tried to leave a light footprint for what I thought was going to be several months, and certainly not more than a year. As the new guy, it's easy for me to say, of course I will connect with you folks, and I will begin a process of transparency and partnership. And you have the right to say, sure, the proof is in the pudding. However, I want to emphasize that it's never been lost on me the events that have occurred in the past that allowed me to be an interim and now give me the professional pleasure, and I mean that in every sincere sense of the word, to be the town administrator for the town of Harwich. I've tried to demonstrate to everybody, and I talk constantly about the tote that I have in my office about how many days till town meeting, 181. And that's because town meeting, as the executive agent, is the end-all be-all. You folks work for and through town meeting. We all do. And so going forward, it's not a pledge, it's not a commitment, it is the appropriate way for me to operate, and that is transparently for the benefit of town meeting. And so I will give you folks the information you look for, and we'll try to always be available to have these conversations going forward. If you want to identify a liaison from CPC to the trust, I would welcome that as well, because what you're looking for is public information, and you're looking for it for the benefit of town meeting. And all roads lead to town meeting. So again, as the new guy, it's easy to say that wasn't me, I didn't do it. What I want you to take from this tonight is, I am committed to that. I've said that to the Board of Selectmen in everything I do. And I hope that as I continue to present to you this evening and in the future, I can demonstrate to you that I'm meeting that commitment. Because you're absolutely right, and I'm certainly not in a position to argue with you folks if I thought you were wrong, but I know you're right.
Joe, what you just said, the liaison between CPC and the trust, does that have to go through the Board of Selectmen?
Well, I don't believe so, because the Board of Selectmen create liaison relationships from the board to their committees. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the trustees, the board, as we're known in our legal documents, is a legal entity that was created by the town through vote of town meeting and was recorded with the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. The trust exists as an entity. I will never say that it exists outside of the town. It cannot and it does not. The trust must work within the boundaries of the town. Having said that, it is a quasi-independent agency where the trust receives funding and is meant to use that to acquire land for the benefit of affordable housing. So I would offer, Mr. Chairman, that between the chairs, so to speak, we can create that. Having said that, I know there are members that have been very diligent in attending, and I don't mean to foist that on anybody, but I appreciate the attendance. What I'm trying to demonstrate is, these are open meetings of a public body, it's a public meeting of a public body for the benefit of the public. So there's nothing that would hold us back from establishing a liaison connection. Whether you do that or not, I'm still gonna be available to you, whether you want me to or not, and whether you invite me to or not, to be quite honest. That's my role and my responsibility, not just as chair of the trust, but as the administrator. But I think those two roles are purposefully inextricably linked. I am the chair of the trust because I'm the administrator, and the administrator has a role and responsibility to the executive, the Board of Selectmen, and through the town meeting, the legislative body.
I think it's
So
an
we can do it.
outstanding idea, and I would go even so far as to say that I'd be willing to put up the selectman's appointee in case they wanted to be a part of that discussion. So we'll see what happens.
Sorry.
Okay, who did I end with? Kathy? Anything else?
No.
Carol?
Thank you. I certainly echo all of the comments about regular communication, especially, it sounds like there's a lot that's going to be happening in the coming months, especially around the Pleasant Lake Ave property. And a lot of those activities will require expenditures, and so that will be very, very helpful. Just a couple of clarifications. So the 7 parcels, 14 acres, that includes the 6 Pleasant Lake parcels and the Sisson Road parcel?
No, that would be the parcels acquired by the trust for that one land deal and the additional land that is expected to be taken by the town. That was
Eminent
voted under
domain.
Article
Okay.
12, where the board has already said that upon the board acquiring ownership, they're going to convey it directly to the trust.
Okay, great, thank you. And just eyeballing this list that we had for this meeting, beginning with the 2018 article, it looks like roughly a little over $1 million between the 3 articles, 58, 42, and 31, well, 2018, 19, and 20, went to the trust, presumably for, acquisition, housing-related expenses. So, and you mentioned earlier, $800,000 was the price for the Pleasant Lake Avenue property. So is it fair to say that of the $1,010,000, that the majority of that went to the purchase of the Pleasant Lake property?
I believe so. I believe so, however, I hesitate to commit to that completely until I've had a chance to go through that.
Okay.
Because the numbers are, as you've said, you look at, and I've heard this from other members of the trust before fully engaging in this role, that they had, or that, I've got to say, we had, over $1 million in funds available. Knowing that $800,000 was expended on the purchase of the land, knowing that an additional $56,000 or $57,000 went to related ancillary services, knowing that the trust had other expenditures, and I can talk about, separate and distinct from the coordinator position, a vendor relationship with J.M. Goldson on talking about community engagement efforts generally. I want to say that was a contract, it was certainly under $50,000. I want to say it was probably in the neighborhood of $20,000 or $25,000. But that was an expenditure that the trust would have paid for through funds available. I talked about the Mass Housing Partnership consultancy as well as the soils test. And so when I ran the report last week for the benefit of the trust, know that if we were at $1 million plus, according to accounting, we're at $416,000 remaining. So, and the chairman knows, I'm not, I fancy myself a wordsmith. What I really fancy myself is not a math major. I know if we add all that up, it's going to exceed what we believe came from community preservation. So that tells me that there were other revenue sources, most likely cell phone tower revenue. I haven't seen any paperwork on that yet, but I've heard estimates of roughly $100,000 or so. I don't know if that's a one-time hit. I don't know if that's what's been done before, but there is some commingling going on. If I can go in further, I also can't commit to that yet because one of the requests I had at the end of this, when you got everything you wanted, so to speak, Mr. Chairman, I have an ask of community preservation. And generally, it's that I've heard that, and these are my words and I'm probably misstating it, that there's some level of restriction on funds that can be used, the funds from CPC related to affordable housing. I've heard anecdotal statements about that. I don't know what that is and what it means, but I also know going forward, I need to be very mindful of that. Is there a percentage or something, or?
There is a percent,
Yeah,
but quite frankly, that's a question for legal.
well, there it is.
And may I,
Carol, go ahead.
to explore also whether there's some restriction or guidelines with respect to level of affordability. So it's not really just the percentage, but what level of affordable housing the funds can be used
Right.
for.
Right.
So I think that should be clear to us all.
And if I may, I agree with that, and that's why I'm trying to, I'm not saying slow the process down. The process is gonna take a long time, as we've heard from other communities. But before I can get the trust moving full bore, so to speak, we have to understand what the limitations are. And it would be a fool's errand for me to continue to spend money not being aware of the restrictions or the requirements on what is affordable. And that really was brought to bear for me. If you look at the article at the special town meeting that created the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund for Affordable Housing, the Board of Selectmen actively put a restriction in that language so that even though it takes a 2/3 to take the money out through town meeting vote, there's a further restriction on what that will result in and what level of affordable it'll impact. So a lot of moving parts that I really need to bring myself up to speed on. And so that's why I don't want to say that of the call it 1.1 million or whatever, that we spent almost 900 of it. I don't know that it all came from those buckets, so to speak. And I'm hoping to rely upon accounting to help me get a true accounting of that, and going back to all the other comments that were made, get it to you folks first, then the trust, and then the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
Appreciated. All set, Carol.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe?
So I just want to be clear that the six, soon to be seven, not very soon, but sometimes in the near future, to be 7 parcels, is the only inventory you have in the housing trust right now.
Correct, but we do expect the 7 parcels, and I was confused by
Seventh or
that.
the 7?
Say again?
It's 7th or the 7?
7, S-E-V-E-N.
I didn't understand
There-
that. Where are
there's
those?
two-
So that's the other, that's the Article 61 from the 2019 annual town meeting.
Okay.
It was supposed to have been conveyed in 2019. It hasn't been. Council informed me tonight she's working on the deeds to get the deeds in front of the board, to convey those to the trust, to record them. So the trust could double its holdings, if you will, within a matter of weeks.
And this other 7 is how many acres?
I believe on that, it's close to 30 all in, on the, I'm gonna refer to them as the Article 61 lands. I think it's close to 30 acres, however, it's not like you see on Pleasant Lake Avenue. They're scattered throughout the town. One of them has a significant conservation restriction through an amendment at town meeting. One of them is the junior theater property. There's a question of whether it includes the building. I've been told definitively by folks that it doesn't. I don't know that that's the case. And then last but not least, it was 8. The 8th one was Albro House, but town meeting mercifully took that off because we can't give up the Albro House at this point in time. We have town employees working there.
Okay. So, on timing, okay, in terms of moving along,
Yep.
because I think you would agree that in housing is my thing, in interest here, but in terms of, I think we're woefully behind several towns around us. We just are.
Without a doubt.
And what I learned in my research is those that are ahead have a housing coordinator that puts all this together. And I know that's gonna happen soon, but when is that, what's the timing on that once?
So I love that if it's a segue.
Well, let's finish one thing at a time. So,
So I have a very significant
we'll,
update
we'll
on
come
that.
up with that later. Go ahead, Joe, you got the floor.
So.
I love segues.
The other thing you mentioned, as an aside, is, now that you've purchased the 6 parcels, I'm all about moving forward, okay? So I'm 20 years a logistics operations guy, and there's gotta be some planning here, Joe. So you say something about RFPs, and that's all your thing. My question is, we finally have some land, right?
Yep.
How do you globally foresee this thing going forward with the land? I mean, it's subject to the engagement of the community, which I think is far more important than your trust, don't take it wrong.
No, I agree.
You know, once you get that, how do you see that going forward? Do you have some kind of plan in place?
We don't yet, and we started that conversation at our meeting last week and last month. That, okay, we, the trust, thought we had these additional 7 parcels. We don't. There was a significant level, subjective word, but of activity that occurred over the last 2 years that seems to have been for naught. And so what I'm trying to convey is, I will share with you, and I mean this in the best possible way, where the trust members, they've been at this, I think all of them since the inception of the trust, which I think is coming up on its 4th birthday next year. And so they've been at it for a long time, and they finally have something tangible. I've had conversations with them at the meeting and outside from the meeting that they're talking about number of units. I'm nowhere near that, and we need to be careful with that. I appreciate the exuberance that they have, but
It's a little too specific.
absolutely, and we're not there yet, because, I can't sit here today, having sat in that seat last night. I always do this for the viewers. This was filmed on November 2nd, so I'm referring to the Selectmen's meeting on November 1st. I'm gonna put it out there. There's a 40B project that's being considered for a local initiative program, LIP, through the Board of Selectmen. I'm watching that, not just as the administrator, but how the town's reacting. So I don't want to throw numbers out there on what we could get for units on Pleasant Lake Avenue until we've had community engagement, until we've talked about what's going to be there, what is affordable housing, and these other parcels. Are they going to be developed? Are they going to be sold and used as, a revenue stream for the trust? Where are we at? And what I'm saying, unfortunately for my colleagues on the trust, is you've existed for 3.5 years, but now we need to begin. Because we need to do it in a more disciplined way. And again, I need to continue to apologize. This is not meant as an indictment of anybody on the trust. These are volunteers such as yourselves that have been putting a good faith effort. I'm gonna put it out there. I blame the administrator. And that's not a joke. I blame me as the interim, and I blame my predecessor. Because you have to rely on somebody, and there's the day-to-day person, until, as you said, Mr. Chairman, we have another resource that may be the coordinator. You have to rely upon the town administrator. And administration has been deficient in that significantly. I'm grateful that I have the role that I have, town administrator and as such chair, because I believe that's exactly why the trust was written up that way, so that you all have a point person. Someone to blame, someone to point the finger at, or better yet, someone to light a fire under, or someone that's gonna light a fire and say, let's get moving.
Well, I just leave it as a positive note. I'm just thrilled that there's a purchase done.
Amen,
With the money-
amen,
with the
absolutely.
money that we provided and through the CPC,
Yep,
so.
it's a tremendous occurrence, absolutely.
It's very exciting. It was the original thought at the beginning, and I agree, so I'm good, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Housing Coordinator.
So the update for Housing Coordinator, I do believe you've received reports in the past where the past 2 chairs of the trust have relied upon, and again, going back to procurement, it's my thing because it has to be, sadly. And, the good news is I've been trained and I'm regimented. For several years, the town has done requests for quotes, which isn't a real thing under procurement. You hear RFP, IFP, those are real. Request for quotes is simply a way of saying, you have $50,000 or less to spend, get 3 quotes. And so we've done that in the past, and we've been able to identify Community Development Partnership, CDP, who is well-known throughout Cape Cod and certainly around here on their work and their ability on advocating for housing and getting work done. I am a graduate, so to speak, of their Housing Institute under another community's dime. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. And so the town has for several years taken what I've understood to be, and I'm going to look at the notes here, what was always understood to be a part-time housing coordinator, and somehow turned it into housing coordination services. And I say that because the many titles I have, one of them is CPO, Chief Procurement Officer, and the other one is CPA, Chief Personnel Administrator. When I hire people, I don't search for quotes. I advertise a position. Part-time housing coordinator, I read that to be a position. And the prior chair and I had a discussion, and we agreed, and under his leadership, the town has advertised this year, this fiscal year, for a part-time housing coordinator. However, as you may recall in our joint meeting that many of you participated in here in this room with the Board of Selectmen, I don't know that part-time is going to be sufficient for what we have coming up and what we need. So first, I will tell you that if you subscribe to the Cape Cod Chronicle, I believe it was the edition that would have come out on the 20th or 21st, whatever that day, that Thursday would be, whereby the advertisement for a housing coordinator is in the paper. We're actively receiving applications for that position. However, I'd like to just read the first couple lines so that everybody understands what we're dealing with presently. Housing coordinator for the town of Harwich, 19 hours a week, temporary position, appointment for a 90-day period with possibility of extension. Hourly rate, $46.80 per hour with no benefits. Responsibilities include providing support services for housing-related programs, projects, and activities. So at that joint meeting, when this came up, members of the board, and I know members of the committee, had questioned whether part-time is sufficient. Now, I believe I understand generally what has been the lineage of this position, I think going back to the inception of the trust, and why the dollar amounts have been what they have been. $50,000 is sufficient to pay somebody less than $50,000 a year for 19 hours a week, which comes out, I think purposefully to what was the understood restriction on retirees, meaning I think it's 922 hours. I know it's been updated, but if you do 19 times 52, that matches whatever's out there for retirees working on a public pension, meaning it's never going to be someone that needs benefits. It's important for the town to bring in a person who is going to be, as I expect it to be, located here in Town Hall for a portion, if not all, of their 19 hours a week, so that there's a face that goes with the position, that goes with the money, that goes with affordable housing. But as the board members have talked about, that may not be sufficient. So what I'm about to say next is not an update per se as me as the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, but rather it's me as the town administrator developing the warrant articles and the budget for fiscal year 23, the 2022 annual town meeting. If the town is going to have a full-time housing coordinator, which transcends the bounds of what brings me here tonight for you folks, that's a new position, and our charter under the chapter related to the town administrator requires that with the Board of Selectmen's approval, must be approved at town meeting. I've interpreted that, and I've told the board my interpretation, and I believe they generally agree with it. That's not simply me putting it in a budget. That's me having a warrant article expressly asking town meeting to create a full-time housing coordinator position because it's been designed and has been approved by the Board of Selectmen. $50,000 ain't gonna cut it. $50,000 is a good amount right now because it gets to, what I think is a competitive rate to bring somebody in. But somebody in for a 90-day. The reason why we did that is we did not want the person to come in to be hired as the part-time housing coordinator and have the position restructured and approved by town meeting. It would have to be advertised. It's a new position. And so we wanted to be clear in the advertisement that we're looking for someone to start. Now, there could be someone that fits every part of this bill that is willing to work 19 hours, no benefits, and make that rate of pay. But they're not gonna make twice that rate of pay as a full-timer. It's not how it rolls. It's gonna be competitively priced. It's gonna be an employee. It's going to be a position under the personnel bylaws and reporting to the town administrator, if that's the direction that the Board of Selectmen gives me. So right now, the update is we should have somebody as a temporary part-time housing coordinator. I would hope perhaps right after the holidays. And for that individual to work hand in glove with me as town administrator and chair to start getting a lot of things done. And one of the first things I envision is the housing-related programs would be start developing community outreach events where we can talk about affordable housing generally, where we can talk about it specifically, and where we can talk about it related to parcels that we own and expect to own in the future. So the trust has used that money over the years, has used it for housing coordination services from a vendor. The contract expired June 30th, and I opted not to do a solicitation pending that discussion with the then chair of the trust, and then that joint meeting between the trust and the Board of Selectmen. Again, I can't say hello in less than 20 words, Mr. Chairman. It's a curse.
I've been over this time and time again, Joe, and you know that, and other members of this board know it. The community outreach, I get, I understand it, but in the simplest, basic terms, a telephone somewhere in this building with a human being that could answer the questions from people who need, doesn't exist. So if you're gonna put in a part-time person, you're gonna allocate some space, you gotta get them a telephone, he or she,
Sure.
so they can perform whatever they need to perform. And it just got lost in the mix. Anyway, I vent. Joe, you have the floor. You started.
So,
With the right to bookmark that one and come back if I could later?
You can.
So what you're asking for is the 50,000 for the part-time now?
I would-
With the understanding that you're gonna go after this full-time thing in the future.
So if I could, so we're now, bleeding into the other updates, which I think you're gonna be underwhelmed if you haven't already been. What I've said to the trust is, I know that we're perpetuated an application. I think it's appropriate to have it in the mix. But the town has talked so much about housing. The town, the Board of Selectmen, the Affordable Housing Trust, Community Preservation and Housing Committee, and Housing Authority and Planning Board, a lot of people need to weigh in on, is it really just a part-time position? And what I hope, and if I can do this, I don't know that I can. Well, here we go. Talking to myself, sorry. What my hope would be, as town administrator, chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, a resident in this town and a voter, I would hope that the town make a commitment to a permanent full-time position, known as housing coordinator for right now. Maybe in the future, it evolves into a stronger management position. What I've heard for the last 6 years as a resident and the last 2 years as an employee is it's desperately needed. And what I've seen is we've done things in fits and starts, and that's the royal we, all of us, or some of us, or none of us. I want to have what I would consider right now to be a placeholder application with you folks in case it all falls apart. Because what I don't want to do is lose the ability to have someone do that. And it strikes me that it's worked well between the predecessor of Housing Trust and you folks to put money aside, and I think Some of you are now appreciative that it's not a company, it's a person. I hope the application ends up being withdrawn or rescinded or not brought forward, because I've been able to make the case and build around those legitimate deficiencies, Mr. Chairman, to get back to that in a moment, that we can't presently meet.
But yeah, I like what you're doing, where you're trying to get someone in there on January 1st, if you can, to do this part-time position, knowing that if you're gonna do full-time, that's a warrant in June. So, you know, that's 6 more months of just waiting around and doing
Right.
nothing
Yeah,
again.
right, we have to do things. Yeah, absolutely.
The only other thing I would leave you with, and if you haven't already, I'm sure you might have, you or whomever, should, talk to the three that I know that are very successful so far. So you got Brewster, Dennis, and Yarmouth. I talked to all three of them. They're all variants of this.
Right.
The one that would be closely to what you're going to do right now is Brewster. Every week, she's over budget. Every week, she asks for
Right.
more hours.
Right.
She gets paid overtime.
Yep.
Okay, and plus, the position's the same, it's 50,000 plus, but they did, that meeting, the little meeting we had before.
Yep.
I thought you could do this, Joe. The town provided the benefits, which were hugely important to her,
Exactly.
and she, and Brewster, and the reason she took the job.
Absolutely.
She wanted the healthcare. So, something to think about in the interim is to add that little caveat. I don't know if that's something that's get approved by the select.
So, well, if I may, we don't have, it's a brilliant move, and it makes sense. And it kills me to say that about other towns, certainly ones around us, because I want to compete. I want to be a competitive employer in the marketplace. I want to get the best and the brightest. I want to get the most energized. We don't have a compelling argument to make. And we, the town, and again, this is where I talk about the deficiencies of administration. We didn't contemplate a package, a benefits package, because yes, CPC funds can be used for salary. You all know, and I've learned, cannot be used for benefits. That doesn't mean benefits couldn't be added, but, excuse me, dry cough, I'm good. That's a game changer. And so,
Something
I
that
don't-
can be approved by the stroke of the pen of the selectmen?
no, because there's no appropriation, meaning town meeting did not appropriate a benefits package
Okay.
for this position. Is there money available? Absolutely, but we need to honor the town meeting process. So, excuse me, that's why I say, we gotta do something. This temporary housing coordinator position is something, it's tangible. But that's why I think the focus should then turn to, as quickly as we can, make it a viable, full-time, benefited position that is attractive to the marketplace. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, I need to find a space for that employee where none presently exist. This building is at capacity. I could say that I'll put them next door to Albro House, but then there's span of control. Then that diminishes that role. Sorry, I don't mean to say that. Sheila House does wonderful work out of that building. That works for Sheila, our youth services coordinator, because she can do counseling there. It's not gonna work well for a housing coordinator because it takes them away from the seat of government. And it's things like that that matter. To me, that's organizational strategizing, communication, and planning. And we, the town, haven't done a good job of that. It's an expertise that I bring from my background. I'm keenly aware of that. Where you sit matters for where you stand in an organization. That's a line I used from a class a million years ago. But to not even be able to offer them an extension, you know, we have the voice over internet phones. They can go anywhere that there's an internet plug. But there's no desk, there's no office, there's no place. And so that's a bad message, and I don't want to perpetuate that. Because it says, yeah, we care about housing coordination. It used to be a closet. Why don't you go sit in there? We'll figure it out. Megan and I will figure it out in the short term. In the long term, in the commitment, it's going to be far more definitive. One of the things that worked with the vendor is we were able to utilize what has had many names. I always call it the wrong thing. But the room outside of administration, which I always knew to be the library, which is now referred to as the selectman's office. God bless them, I don't think they've ever used it as an office, and I can't blame them. That's where the company set up their employee. We've also had them in the room over there. So in the short term, they will have access to all of our drives, to all of our email. We'll have a town-issued laptop, which is a telephone. I just don't want the person bouncing around. And if I could set up an additional desk in administration, I would, to convey to the world, you know, administration's meant to be the
buck
center.
stops.
Exactly. But to go back into that, my spoiler alert is, I would love for that article, that application to be rescinded, because we, the town, have made a broader commitment. And with all due thanks to the community preservation for making it happen for the years that you did.
Okay, let me complete this circle. Carol?
Thank you. Yeah, I also, share concerns about the part-time position. I mean, this is a really specialized skill set that's needed to be effective. And I think, not that a person who would apply for a part-time job wouldn't have that, but I think it's just, there's just a lot at stake here. So I'm heartened to hear that there's consideration being given to a full-time position that would be apparently incorporated into the operating budget.
Correct.
So I guess a question, and maybe there's not an answer tonight, is just, I'm a little bit unclear on sort of the reporting, because if this is a town employee reporting to, or even a part-time person reporting to as town administrator, but coordinating the housing trust, which you earlier remarked is sort of a quasi-independent group, I'm just not clear on how that works. And it also seems to me that this position will need to coordinate with other parts of, the housing committee, the housing authority, and other, organizations within the town. So just understanding, and maybe that's all to be thought out ahead of you, but, what that reporting procedure is and who that person really reports to and works for and responds to on an ongoing basis. And I would hope that one of the things that this individual might be tasked to do is to lead in the development of a housing action plan that, starts with the production plan, but also just builds out from there to identify the resources needed and really maps out the strategy going forward. So that I think that's how this whole effort can be much more, effective going forward. So just a few thoughts. Thank you.
If I may, in response to some of the things. For better, for worse, I've thought a lot about those initial things that you talk about, reporting structure and everything else. And I'll back up. The housing coordinator role as it presently exists, I understand it. But procedurally, I disagree with how it was created. And that's, a statement that goes back to predecessors related to the trust. My understanding was that the town administrator was seeking that position for a lot of the same reasons that we've said tonight. And given that the administrator at the time was known to be the chair of the trust, I think the assumption was built up, or perhaps perpetuated, I'm not sure which, but that it was always understood to be the trust. That can't be the case under our personnel bylaws, under our charter. And charter, again, is the special law, which means it's not just the town of Harwich, but also under the labor laws, which is chapter 150E. Mm-hmm. There is only one employer in a town, and it's the Board of Selectmen. And so for that reason, the board refers to me in the charter as the chief personnel administrator, so that they employ people and I manage them, if you will. Now, I'm not going to get into the differences with public safety and water and things of those nature, but generally speaking, if you take out library, public safety, and water, everybody else ties back to the administrator. So the role is that I just described here is now in our personnel bylaws. It has to be. It has to exist somewhere. The personnel bylaws are the domain of the administrator. I don't mean to be speaking in the third term. I'm trying to relate it to the charter. And the town administrator is responsible for the full execution of the personnel bylaws. So that's the classification of the position, the compensation of the position, and all the other non-benefit but employee-related things. They still have rights. So the Board of Selectmen has to be the employer. They can't devolve that to anybody. The trust is not authorized as a trust to have staff or employees, or even technically an operating budget, if you will. They are meant to be trustees with a fiduciary responsibility of funds expended for. So it has to be that this person now, the coordinator, not a company, not an entity, has to report to the administrator. However, it's not meant going forward to be a day-to-day direct report of mine. Megan Eldridge, our Assistant Town Administrator for HR, has a role in that and will have a role. And we've developed a job description that can be expanded for the full-time role that I've talked about. I don't know what predecessors envisioned for a coordinator. I'm not really worried about that. I know what I'm looking for, and I'm not spitballing here, this may be the title, housing advocate or housing program manager. You know, something that gives more heft and understanding to what's your role. And so affordable housing advocate is another one. But that person in that full-time role, I envision would be a manager. So would be in the professional classification of the personnel bylaws, so still under the span of control of the administrator. But similar to many of the managers that are under that, has autonomy and would be looking to partner with the planning department, everybody in community development, for just those reasons that you talked about. So for an abundance of reasons, the trust cannot be the boss. I think it was muddied in the past because of that duality of the administrator, both the chair and the administrator, so two for the price of one. For me, this permanent position going forward cleans a lot of that up. It would understood to be a potentially manager position under personnel bylaws for the benefit of the town, whereby the board employs them and the administrator manages them. So I have thought about that, you know, intensely, but I think all of that is a good message as we progress to that article, if that happens in that position, because it's gonna force everybody to talk about what are they gonna do? Well, how do we get the best value of it? And I love that you talk about not only the housing production plan, but the housing action plan and all of that, that our planner, John Eidman, and I are working on always, but also in relation to the comprehensive plan and everything that goes with that. To have another resource like that, to add to the all-stars that we have, I love that. We can go from one of the laggards on the Cape to potentially one of the leaders. And I am competitive, because that's a good thing to compete for. We want to make a tremendously positive impact on housing, affordable housing in our community for our region. And so I'm really getting jazzed up about it. I'm sorry I went on so long.
No, it's great.
I love
Thank
the
you.
questions. Because the thinking of where you folks at is great in November. It's going to be even better come May.
Thank you.
Thanks for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
John, you've got the floor.
Okay, I don't have any questions, but I just would like to express my appreciation for you talking a lot tonight, because.
Did you say appreciation for talking a lot?
Yeah.
Can we get that in the minutes? Thank you, John. I'm going to print that one out and put it in my board, and I mean that sincerely.
It's on tape.
But seriously, previously, when we've had discussions about housing, and particularly with people about the housing trust, everything has been as clear as mud for me.
Yeah.
And I don't come from a place of being a housing advocate. Housing has not been my issue. So really clear as mud, and you've just blown out a lot of these things that I didn't understand before, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that.
Just remind me not to say hello to you in the future.
Exactly. That's on you. But thank you. I do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, John. Kathy?
Yes, so I believe we funded a position last year, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So with 6 months not being used of the contract, we have 6 months of funding that could be applied towards something, correct? To extend the position if need be, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure, if that's the will of the committee, meaning, yeah, I'm not thinking of it that way. I agree with you that we're talking about probably less than 6 months of expenditure, if you will. And I keep reminding everybody, because I know people in the general public are gonna say, that's worth 50 grand. It's not, you have to prorate it. My expectation would be at the end of the process, I wouldn't have an objection to returning the funds.
Right.
And that's where I was predisposed to go.
Okay, so the position, if it's advertised for temporary 90 days, is it able to be renewed for 90 days?
Correct. Under the personnel bylaws, the administrator can execute consecutive 90-day appointments.
Okay.
Yep.
And who is performing the responsibilities of the part-time housing coordinator as it existed before, right now?
No one. We had a firm that was under contract. The contract expired naturally on June 30th. The chair of the trust at the time opted not to pursue it yet, pending further evaluation. And so, there was really a substantive discussion in September that then allowed me to go to the Board of Selectmen and the trust and all that. We have not had that. I will tell you, however, I have been far more engaged in trust matters because there has to be somebody, and that's what I get paid for.
Well, every time that we asked for a report and asked for specifics about what the person did, we were told that we couldn't get any specifics. We were told we couldn't even get how many hours it broke down to.
Look at the
But that it
expression
was-
on the administrator's face.
But the other thing was that it was a hugely important job to the trust to have the coordinator. That's what we were told every single year when it came down to talking about the next, request. And it's just, it's frustrating that the position was supposed to be so critical to the daily operations of the trust, and yet for 6 months, been moving along without anybody.
Yeah. My response to that would be, the Community Development Partnership provided exceptional resources that were limited by the trust. So I had an opportunity to work directly with Andrea Aldana and Pelinda Deegan. And first of all, you won't find better people than those two, and they're incredible professionals. The town didn't build it right, so they gave whatever they could in support of affordable housing in Harwich. But I think they were hamstrung by what the town was perpetuating. Quite honestly, so what I want to say is, what they did was of value. I know they would probably be here tonight saying they could have added far more. But new guy before my time, can't speak to it. I'm going to use that card for right now. If I could.
Okay.
But they represented their firm well, and they're professionals. There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
You all set, Kathy? Elizabeth?
I'm gonna breathe. This position was not, at least when I was on the CPC last year and we approved it, it was not supposed to be solely for the use of the trust. And yet, that's what happened. You said, Andrea and Pelinda, I've learned so much from them taking through the CDP, but they never did anything about housing anywhere in Harwich other than working with the trust, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, that's my general understanding as well.
And so that, to me, is very worrisome going forward, that this part-time position is going to end up being the trust's secretary and not an actual person trying to work with all the housing entities. Because it's not just town entities like this and the Housing Authority and the trust. There's also HAC and HETCH and all these other groups that need to be brought into the discussion. And that's what I think a coordinator needs to do. And I know that's impossible at 19 hours, but I at least I would like that to be considered in the part-time position so it doesn't get lost if we, please God, get a full-time position. Does that make sense?
Just to clear the record a moment, Elizabeth, from the very inception of the trust, the coordinator, the part-time coordinator, that was the job, to be at the beck and call of the trust. I don't disagree with the latter part of what you said, but in the beginning, that's the way it was designed.
But not last year. Last year, it was not attached to the trust. Because I asked when we were funding it last year, that would this part-time position be responsible? I see, the list we got, it said at the beginning, X amount of money, including money for part-time coordinator. X amount of money, including money for part-time position. Last year, we got a request for a part-time housing position.
Coordinator. Go ahead,
Was
Kathy.
not
I
attached
think
to the
the confusion
trust.
was
Was.
because the Affordable Housing Trust did not come to us seeking additional funding last year. The only funding they sought was for the housing coordinator. It was still attached to the trust, they just didn't ask for money for the trust themselves.
Thank you for clearing that up,
Okay,
Kathy.
but I would just like to state that in the future, just having someone working for the trust is worthless to me.
Sure, if I may, I agree with that sentiment, and it goes back to my responses to Carol's points as well. I think what has confused the issue over the years is what is the town administrator? So I'm very comfortable in this role until I am tapped on the shoulder and told to rethink what I'm about to say. The town administrator is the town administrator. So the town created the trust several years ago and decided to incorporate the town administrator, not only as a member, but as the chair. And so I agree with the sentiment because any resource, part-time or otherwise, that we have is too valuable to have so pigeonholed as to only do that. And I want to emphasize that one of the value statements that and I do talk like that with the team, but one of the value statements that I talked to the admin team about was, I think one of the benefits you get by having the town administrator serve specifically for the Affordable Housing Trust role to again buttress how important affordable housing is in the town, is you get all of the toys and powers, if you will, or however I say it, all the accoutrements that come with being a town administrator. What is that? An administrative staff that is incredibly adept at everything to do with a public meeting. I would not rely upon a housing coordinator to post a meeting, to help with the agenda materials and the packets, and the minutes. I rely upon the administration staff, because that's what they're trained to do, that's what they're highly qualified to do. And I don't want a part-time coordinator, I don't want a full-time coordinator spending that amount of time on that, because that coordinator is supposed to coordinate, absolutely, amongst those groups, amongst the community development departments, amongst several parties, that the admin team and administration is not supposed to do. So it's very clear delineation of authority. And again, using that through a firm of professionals equally, if not more adept presently, to make an impact upon housing for minutes is not a good use of money. And so I think that's why the past chair was considering going from services to a position, and it's why I'm moving it forward. You're absolutely right.
Elizabeth?
Town
you
administrator has to be good for something.
All set?
I'm set.
Robert?
So we're really kind of covering CH4, aren't we?
We're covering a lot, yes, we are.
I was hoping you'd say
But
that.
anyway,
Yeah, no, no, I've just been taking in everything that's been said tonight and pretty much agree with the committee on everything that's been discussed. So think I'm okay right now.
okay, thank you, Robert. I'm gonna hit you with one more, then maybe you wanna take a break? This is like an
I'm just
interrogation.
getting warmed up. Did you know this is my element?
Okay, here we go. Judah Eldridge, acquisition.
Thank you. However, be warned that there's gonna be a consistent message or a theme tonight.
None of this has to be executive session, correct?
Correct. Because the Judah Eldridge, as you know it, is related to an appropriation through community preservation. And I'm gonna cheat, based on the notes here, that go back to 2018 under Article 55. Anything that has to do with land, I am fortunate to be able to rely upon our legal counsel of KP Law and to be able to work with Katie Klein again. Katie and I worked hand in glove on a number of land issues in Wellfleet when I was there, and John Giorgio has been good enough to redirect Katie to work with me. She's the one working on the deeds for the Article 61 lands to convey. She's working on the land taking. So I reached out to Katie and asked her if she could inform me on knowing that the chair had a meeting with the chair of the board and another member to resuscitate this project, so to speak. She brought me up to speed to the point where I'm now aware that KP Law was working on appropriate next steps, albeit almost a year after the vote, meaning there was a legal document that answered several questions of which I'm not allowed or able to share with you, but that's a side story. What Katie has indicated is that KP Law, at the direction of a previous administrator, back in September of 2019, recommended two surveying companies to the town because the next step, now this is to be clear, this was the next step that should have been taken in September of 2019 that is presently under consideration, was to acquire survey services, and I'm trying to read from the notes without releasing too much privileged information, whereby the town's law firm relied upon a title researcher to examine the records related to Judah Eldridge. I'm actually paraphrasing here. And what the title examiner found was that there was no way to determine ownership, and so therefore the attorney recommended to the town, the attorney title searcher, that a survey must be done as the next step. Now, unfortunately for me, I've learned far more. I thought I knew a lot more of that, but I've learned far more about surveying and the necessity of it more in the last 6 weeks than I have in the last 30 years of municipal government. Long story short, the town is seeking a surveying firm to survey that property to assist in the title research for the board to then determine what their next steps would be. That's where we're at with Judah Eldridge. It was disconcerting to me to find that it was 2 years and 9 days of no action. But Katie was able to really bring me thoroughly up to speed on everything. So the town, on many projects, is seeking survey work, as I've indicated, as is the trust. As you can imagine, with the real estate market still being the way it is, and I guess it's a supply chain issue as well, it's exceedingly difficult to get anybody under contract in the short term. What I'm hoping the town can do, both for the benefit of administration working on the Judah Eldridge project, so-called, and as administrator working on the trust, is put together a full package of the town is looking for survey services for these specific projects, and they're going to be probably 6 to 8 parcels, and are able to build something of some heft that it'll turn some company's attention that we're not looking for a $5,000 job. We're looking for a pretty significant survey services. So that is my Judah Eldridge update.
Okay. Kathy?
Not much of an update. So is the town still planning on taking this parcel by eminent domain?
I can say presently, I believe so. And I will defer to the chair, meaning I know that the chairman had a conversation with my bosses that caused me to be back into the process. What I expect is after survey takes place, KP Law will then take the next steps related to the taking. However, upon the survey, I think it's incumbent upon me to inform the Board of Selectmen to see what their next steps are.
So just for, basic explanation, I mean, we've been told for years that there were, close to, 400 heirs to the Judah Eldridge property, or thereabouts.
Right.
And we know that there's 4 parcels within that 24 acres. And so what you're saying is that when they tried to do title research, they couldn't do it without an updated survey? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what I'd
I'm
like to do.
trying to understand what
Right.
one has to do with the other.
Well, first I'm noticing that there's not the usual demarcation on it, that this is confidential, so that's what I'm trying
Okay,
to
okay.
skate on, but if I could,
There
Mr.
are,
Chairman.
if this is of any interest to you, there are folks that are looking into that particular property. That's why I asked initially about the confidentiality.
Yeah, so specifically so what Katie's colleagues had been working on remains confidential.
Okay,
Her update to me, because is one that I can rely upon, but if I could, for Kathy's question, the title researcher has discovered that there is no way to ascertain which parcel of land Judah Eldridge owned in fee, particularly since there are several plans on record which show large portions of what was considered to be Judah Eldridge's property as being owned by others, and I think that's where the others come in. So for that reason, again, the title researcher's report back to the town 2 years ago was, you need a survey. And so that's the next step. The town's gonna go forward on this, the next thing we have to do is engage a surveyor. And whatever that gleans, presumably, well, it would go back to Katie first at KP Law. They might rely upon their title service firms, they've got several, to then figure out next steps.
And there was no survey done when it was appraised?
I'm not aware of any, and Katie did not indicate that there was.
Okay, all right,
There could have been, but I'm not aware of it.
okay. So if the survey is done and the title research is done and they decide to take it by eminent domain, okay? We all know that there was some discussion in the past that the tax lien would have to be paid first. And then one of the selectmen said that that wasn't going to happen at town meeting in the last year. So what's the route that it's supposed to take legally? Does the tax lien is it mandated that the tax lien be paid off with the $369,000 from CPC?
This is the briefest statement I can make. I do not know at all.
Okay,
Yep, I'd have to be educated on that.
because that's an important question.
Absolutely. I know enough to know that part, but I couldn't possibly answer the first part.
Okay. And I guess, so how long would we, as a committee, who are watching the funds for the taxpayers, how long should we give this process? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
I was,
that's not
I truly mean.
that's not a question to the town administrator. That's a question to this board.
Well, true.
Well, I was gonna thank her for asking me for that very reason. Here's what I would say, knowing what the Board of Selectmen has focused on in the last 6 months or so, and what I've been tasked to do. The board has directed me to expedite this, to figure out if there's any further actions that may need to be taken through CPC, and/or in tandem at town meeting in May. And so knowing that my draft warrant needs to be finalized by February, we'd need to know really soon if we need to take any other actions at town meeting. And I think, not having spoken directly to the chair of the board on this, I think the directive right now is keep it moving so we can make affirmative and informed decisions.
Okay. Done.
Thank you, Kathy. John,
I'll pass, thank you.
Robert,
I'm satisfied.
Joe,
Same, I'm good, that, very enlightening conversation with these two. so,
Elizabeth.
learned a lot.
No. Kathy?
Carol.
No comment, thank you.
Okay, I speak for all.
I should have taken that break, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, would you like to take that break now before you get into the next three, or are you fine?
Well, no, I'd like to, persevere if I could.
Okay,
Only because, and I'm going to rely on Bob's earlier estimation that I think all we have left is H3.
Yeah.
So.
floor is yours, sir.
Well,
Huh?
The floor is yours.
I don't have much to report, unfortunately. I was able to have an informal meeting, or intended to have an informal meeting with stakeholders throughout Harwich Center in support of the application that you know is H3 to beautify Harwich Center. It's no secret, I think, Mr. Chairman, you know, I think you may have been at the meeting, but when I was directed by the board to do this, I tried my best to have them curtail it. However, I need to be clear that the board has emphasized that beautifying Harwich Center, and not just with CPC funds, is a priority of the board for several reasons. However, knowing the limitations of CPC funding and not having yet developed a clear plan, and having more government agents, so-called, present, including committee members, than stakeholders, was eminently disappointing to me. That is to say, we did not hear a hue and cry from the merchants and residents around Harwich Center as to what they would look for beautification. Now, I was prepared to tell them that simply for this application, what I was looking to do is what was an earlier effort by DPW. You may be familiar with what I consider to be classic New England lanterns throughout the town hall property and the parking lot, as well as the planters that we have. And the mindset was to update them. The lanterns are a little bit dated here in the town, but the overall look is the same. And to have lanterns, electric-powered lanterns, that you can post banners from throughout Harwich Center, in addition to planters similar to what we have at Town Hall. And that was important to, or is important to do for Harwich Center, because then the plan is to next go to the village of Harwichport. And then perhaps the other villages, certainly East Harwich, West Harwich, what have you. There was an underwhelming response by what we considered, the Board of Selectmen and I, were considered to be the stakeholders within the center. And the lanterns themselves, I was told yesterday by a staff member, very disappointedly, because we've been talking about this internally for weeks, that the cost related to lay the conduits and infrastructure for the electricity for the lamps is excessively costly. And so far more than the placeholder number that I thought. So I have to report back to the Board of Selectmen to let them know what my update was to you folks. I won't be able to do that any sooner than November 15th. I don't know, quite honestly, how to proceed next. I hope and expect that the board will give me guidance and direction, because I agree with the board that we, the town, Board of Selectmen and administration, don't want to miss an opportunity to avail ourselves of some funds to beautify Harwich Center. The net effect of my stakeholder meeting was for me to announce to 3 individuals related to one establishment that the Jersey barriers are being removed, if haven't already been removed. from the center as it relates to the shared streets grant, because we need to plow sooner rather than later. And the planters that were acquired through the shared streets grant are gonna be put in storage, and either reused throughout town or perhaps gifted to, a group that's inclined to do gardening. I can tell you that I could proceed with an application that envisions the purchasing of, say, 6 to a dozen planters to be used throughout Harwich Center. But I say that sheepishly, that is not what I consider to be beautifying. I told those present at the stakeholders meeting that I am working on, unrelated to CPC, because I understand it to be not an eligible project, a capital project to see if the town can make inroads on off-street parking. Because for me, we can beautify the center, we can continue to remove parking on the north side of Main Street, but we're not gonna do anything for the benefit of the center, the merchants, and the residents if we, the town, don't come to some conclusion on parking. And so I am still moving forward on that effort. What that ends up with, I don't know, because I have to present it to the board. So I have very little to offer this evening, other than I've updated you, and now I must go to the board next before I can tell you what the next step would be.
Okay, I'm personally disappointed. I've been working a lot in Chatham and in Dennisport, and I see what those communities have provided their towns. And other than the size of the rotaries, which are an issue, it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
And I think with the aesthetics of the town, where it sits now, I think it would be outstanding. But that's one person's point of view. Okay, go ahead, Kathy, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a couple questions. So, on the first page of the application, under Town Committee Board or Organization, you have the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust, which I'm sure is an incorrect.
Yeah, that was a typo that carried over when we copied
So-
and pasted.
Is there a Town Committee Board Organization we should put in there? Because obviously that's incorrect.
So it was meant to be the Board of Selectmen,
Okay. Board of
because it's a
Selectmen.
directive of the Board of
Okay.
Selectmen. Yep.
All right. I guess my question with all of this is that you've requested this funding under historic. I'm sure that the Harwich Center has been designated as historic resource by the HDHC. I'm not doubting that, but I don't understand how the beautification with planters, et cetera, fits in. Because it says the applications for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and/or restoration of historic resources. Now, I just, in my mind, wanted to figure out what the definitions were. So restoration, one of the definitions is bringing back to a former position or condition. And rehabilitation is the restoration of something damaged or deteriorated to a prior, bringing it back to a prior good condition. I don't see how planters does that, how that fits into that category.
My only response would be is knowing that there existed oil lanterns in the past, and what I was told was a historic look for the center. Now, I will put out there that the directive from the board was beautify Howard Center and rely upon funding sources such as community preservation. I didn't know what else to put it under, quite honestly. And since I'm self-reporting live and on television, I will say that the Board of Selectmen were right to direct me to do this project. And I need to do a better job of envisioning what that is, because this was meant by the board to, my words, not theirs, but correct what happened over the past winter and spring, where the town, through the Board of Selectmen, was able to acquire shared street grants from the Department of Transportation to the tune of $142,000+. If I had that availability now, and I could rely upon community preservation and capital projects and others, I could make that sing. But that's not how the town went forward on that project. And so we committed to the Department of Transportation, and by extension the Commonwealth, that we, the town, after the Shared Streets program, which was meant to first allow for expanded access under COVID for certainly the restaurant establishments, but to also offer a safer space for pedestrian and cyclists. The directive from the state is that after you've used the money and it's all gone or whatever, do something beyond that. And so that was really the directive that bore this project. Having said that, I am at a loss to figure out what to cobble together. Now, part of that is I should have taken the break. I've spoken a long time. But I do expect when I go before the board, they and I will be able to have a stronger conversation of other things to consider. I was really thrown off by the lack of stakeholder support. And that was meant to be a salve to those folks because I understand why they were incredibly disappointed with the project that came up over the last winter and spring. And this was meant to be an olive branch, again, my words, not the board, to the residents, to the merchants, to the businesses in that area of saying, we hear you, and we want to take the next steps to beautify that area. The chairman's absolutely right, the benefit we've seen in other towns, but also to start there and then spread to the other villages. So I am not authorized to rescind this application at this time. I will continue the good fight, but I would look for direction from the committee.
I just don't see how it can be funded under the Community Preservation Act as it-
Only one section of it,
what do you mean?
only the plantings,
The beautification. If
the plantings specifically.
Yeah, but if
That's
they-
what you're defining it as. So
well,
as far as the
what we
street,
have,
as far as the
have struck-
streetlights are
like,
concerned,
if
they can.
Yeah, I know, if they came to us and said, okay, we have pictures, the Historical Society came, or the HC came before us and said, we have pictures of lanterns from
Right.
18-something or whatever, yes.
just said they do.
Absolutely, okay? But beautification with planters and other,
And I understand, but just remember, this board has the ability to modify the applications. We have done it in the past. We have allowed that in the past. So, go ahead, go forward. Get whatever you can. You've heard the arguments here tonight. You're going to hear a few more arguments, but this is possible.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Elizabeth?
I'm sort of contrary here because unlike most people on Facebook, I think it looks nice, the changes.
I don't care about
The way,
Facebook.
the way it, no, but I'm just saying that, you know, the people that were the most vocal in town about what happened do not like the
You mean with
changes. And I think it's great. I've noticed easier pedestrian sightlines and stuff, and I don't think it looks bad at all. So that's where I'm being a contrarian. I'm fine with what's happening in Harwich Center. The one thing that might change how we define what money we give is that the one problem with what was done is because of where the planters are, the bike lanes aren't as, we don't really have bike lanes. So
if I
we
may-
could change this
The
to.
planters that were on the Jersey barriers, both of which are going away.
Right, and so then hopefully that red part would become more clearly delineated bike lanes, at which point the CPC funds could be classified under recreation, not historic. Does that make sense?
That's a stretch. But
I mean,
it's a good thought.
It's a different application.
Right, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Elizabeth, you all set?
I'm set.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
So, and they did reach out to the Historic District and Commission, and we did give feedback that, you know, we do believe that the lamp posts, some type, are very appropriate because the Howard Center did have them. And there's an example of exactly the one that was on Pleasant Lake Avenue in the intersection up at the Historical Society. And I know that can be somewhat replicated. And those were placed throughout Main Street. The other thing that we are very concerned about is sidewalks too, because there were, like in front of the library, that was always brick, you know, and it's a mishmash now.
That's the one we can't do. is-
Okay, well, so, yeah, I definitely want to pursue this. I know there's probably a money issue involved here, obviously, with the underground wiring. And I think we can take a quick look at solar, because they would not have the installation cost, with some trepidation, but I think that's something we can look at. And I would certainly invite that we talk with at Historic District meeting to get into a little more details of how to refine this and look at different fixtures that might be appropriate, or then, you know, so that we could possibly come up with something.
Thank you. And if I may, going back to the other comment, when I first was given this, my focus was to start on the corner of the Exchange Building and potentially have this impact upon, I don't know if there's an official name for it, I've always called it Exchange Building Plaza. For the benefit, is that what it's called?
It's Exchange Park, yes.
All right, there we
Exchange
go.
Park, yeah.
See, I must have read it, so I can't take credit. But I was hoping that the shared streets grant would have impacted upon that more. To me, there's a spot there that we want to attract the eye to. We want to commemorate the history that was there, and to me, it's an entryway to the center. That may still come back to bear on this, given that we were looking to impact upon stakeholders, but perhaps I can build something around that as well. Because I don't disagree with where you're coming from. I will try to rely upon the other members, but I think I understand where you're coming from. But overall, again, the overall point of the application is to make a positive impact upon that square, that center, and then use that as the model throughout town. Because the board has recognized that we should start focusing more on our villages and in support of the residents, the merchants, the cyclists, and the pedestrians. I wrote down solar, Bob, but I want you to know that that would be a last resort.
Yes.
But I appreciate that for sure. Bottom line is, something needs to be done. The town did some work through a one-time grant from the state. We're now prohibited from applying for that kind of grant for, I think, at least 2 years, because that might have impacted on the infrastructure work. But again, I'll go back to the board and we'll figure out something appropriate to continue the effort.
But
Okay, thank you.
sorry.
Bob, you all set?
Yeah, I think so.
John?
Yeah, well, my reaction was similar to what Kathy had to say, which I couldn't see how that was gonna fit into the historic category. I didn't do what Kathy did, which was go back and read each item of the definition of what's allowable and think about that, but that's what needs to be done, and that's what I foresee happening when you actually come back here, assuming that will happen, with something a little more specific. This notion of historic lamps or restoring previously used gas lamps with electric, hopefully LED lit. I don't know how incandescent or LED lamps are actually historic, but, I mean, I have just a lot of questions about this,
Sure.
actually, and I'm not sure, once there's something specific to sort of judge against the requirements, I'm not sure how I would end up
I can understand that point of view.
feeling about this.
All set, John?
I'm all set.
Joe?
I don't, the only thing I would add is, I don't know how you originally went after the stakeholders in the first go-around to let them know that there was a meeting or something.
Direct invitation. We had conversations.
So you we worked the room and knocked on the doors and,
In a manner of speaking, we, through staff and other resources sitting behind me, we were able to reach out to various stakeholders. They were told in the past that we were going to be doing it.
yeah.
I don't know if it's because the ire has died down about what happened with the grant. Regardless, the directive of the board is to start working on beautifying our villages.
Right. I'd just love to see them have a total involvement in.
Yeah, and
If
that's,
they're involved, then they're gonna approve it, and if they don't show up to the table and you do all this work, they're gonna say, what'd you just do? You know what I mean? They're not
right.
just gonna-
I will say that the bright spots, and again, I think the energy is flagging by me, so I'm not as perky as I was at however many hours ago, sorry. I saw that now. I wanted to tread lightly. I didn't want to say to them, here's my application and what we're gonna do. Do you like it?
Right.
You know, I wanted that engagement. Whether that engagement happens or not, something needs to be done for Harwich Center for beautification. Whether this application goes forward or not, there are other items that are still going forward. Bob had mentioned sidewalk work. I have capital money that has existed, I think, for 2 years now, on sidewalk repairs and enhancements, which need to be done from an ADA compliance standpoint, but also perhaps incorporating an historic feel for the center where both things are met. And if we do that through the center, we plan on continuing down Sisson Road. It's what, I think it's very clever, I didn't create it, but I've been perpetuating it. It's what was referred to as the center to the center through the center. Handicap accessible, wide, pedestrian-friendly sidewalks going from community center through Harwich Center to the cultural center. So, as I talked about, there's a project contemplating parking somewhere adjacent to the center, the sidewalk project. So, there's going to be other things done. It's not a foregone conclusion that, you know, nothing's going to happen there. But it would be nice to try to do something in tandem that relies upon CPC money, again, for the benefit of all, to say this is where our CPC money goes. But plenty will be done in the coming years around the center.
Yeah, and I would agree with the chair. I think there's a way for you to fit this in to CPC with the correct wording.
Excluding the planters. Okay, let me finish with the board first, and I'll come back to you folks. Carol?
Has any thought been given to a betterment district or a business improvement district? I'm just thinking, you know, these are grand scale plans, and, you know, I think a contribution from the CPC toward it, but, you know, the investment of the property owners in the area might be significant as well. It certainly will benefit them. I just wonder if that's been considered.
The answer is no, but it will. Thank you very much. That's a wonderful thought. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
All set, Carol?
Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth?
I just had two things. One, there were plans, I don't know how many years ago, put in place, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We had the cultural committee that got the state grants to make this a whole cultural walk and all of that. Did that die?
Not at all. It's not my place yet, and I'm not going to yield my time to the gentlewoman behind me. But progress has been made, and we're hoping sooner rather than later we'll be able to announce what's happening with the multiple cultural districts that we hope the state will approve. Again, I didn't do it. Somebody else earned that, but I'm not yielding the mic, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and then, I just had one more quick question.
Kathy?
The lights, I mean, don't we already have lights? I don't get why infrastructure is so expensive.
Neither do I. It was a point that came up at the stakeholders meeting yesterday, so I haven't even had a chance to vet what that really means. I'm getting great information on betterments and other stuff, so I just would have liked to have honored your process and your time by having far more information tonight than what I'm able to give.
Got it. Well,
I thought he wanted to
So
talk to
unless
me
there's
out
any
there.
further questions, do I have a motion to adjourn? All right. I want to thank Joe for his time.
He needed to leave the room, so I was in charge.
ah,
I think that's what he's doing, yeah.
That was not clear.
So you can go.
No, he can't.
Madam Chair will not
okay, she
allow
had
it.
more
Run.
questions too.
Should have run while I had a chance.
Yeah, let him go.
No, can't. I was just gonna say that I think that the application is just premature.
I don't disagree.
Okay, I
don't
just
disagree.
think that we have certain questions on the application that we request all the applicants to answer, such as how does it fit into the local comprehensive plan? Have you sought public opinion, other than, say, the merchants? And, you know, those are important questions that go into vetting the application.
Yep.
In addition, project costs, estimates at least, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it is a premature application. I would also like to see different groups, like if we're really talking about restoring the historic presence in Harwich Center, groups like the Historical Society and the Brooks Academy Museum Commission, you know, to be part of the discussion, along with the Historic District Historic Commission. I just think that it's premature, that's all.
So I wish you had heard Madam Chair, is she still in the chair? Right before you came in, Elizabeth offered me an opportunity to make a heartfelt statement, which is sincere. However, my earlier comment was, I was hoping to have far more information, a far more developed, cogent application than what you have tonight. It just hasn't been coming together. And so I wanted to do so to be respectful of your time and your process. I accept and agree with where you're coming from. It is premature. I know that I will be directed to continue on, but I appreciate the comments. And I do not want to come here lightly or wasting your time.
Are we all set, Kathy? Okay. All right.
How long that might be waiting.
Okay, so we've completed, does anybody want to ask any questions in addition to C5? Just to make sure.
You mean, excuse me, Mr. Chair, about C5?
CH5, yeah.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Just, well, and I know we talked a lot about the trust, but I felt that was more retrospective, and I didn't really have a sense of what this request was going to be for. You did mention, Joe, that you were gonna be putting together like an accounting of how funds have been spent, and I think that would be really informative for this decision, and also the sense of how those funds would be applied going forward. So that doesn't have to be answered tonight, but I think it would be really great to have that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I will say briefly, I conveyed as such to the former chair that I'm not fully briefed on what the intent was when the application was contemplated months before. So I need to come up to speed on that and add everything that I've talked about before as well.
Great, thank you.
I need to get a handle on that accounting.
Okay, go around the board. Joe?
Yeah, just, I think it's important to note, like, in CH5, it's $500,000, of which, even before you were here, someone else came before us and asked for the same amount of money. And it's the only group that comes to ask for that amount of money without any plan or
Right?
Do you know what I mean?
I do,
And
I do.
understand, I wonder how other CPC boards do this as it relates to the Affordable Housing Trust, when they come in front of them with money, do they have, it doesn't have to be excessively planned out, but just some kind of, this is what we think we're gonna do with the money. Other than like, I'm gonna buy land.
Amen. I take that comment and I look back in the direction of the chair. I can't believe it's taken me several hours to finally come to this point, but the reason why I talk about honoring your time and your process is, as some of you know, I used to be you folks. And the irony's not lost on me, and I know the chair knows it. I was opposed on the initial application for $500,000 to be given to the trust because I felt that the process was convoluted and backwards. And
Yourself and the vice chair?
I have not forgotten that. And to Carol's question, I know I'm asking for it. What do I plan on doing with it? Especially now where we do have other revenue sources that are coming up. You know, and that's a good thing. The trust should have a diverse portfolio, so to speak. And we, the town, need to move past simply, hi, it's me, give me my money, and we'll go use it. And I hope we get there sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you, Joe. John?
What they said.
Kathy?
I'm all right now.
Bob?
Yeah, I do remember from these other conversations that, it was clearly said that we need this money set aside when opportunities come up. Now, nobody can predict what opportunities, but look we had that Pleasant Lake property just drop in our lap, and it could only been done because we've allocated about $1 million.
Exactly.
And so I don't think we can get too fussy about what it's going to be used for, as long as it's used for the housing, to acquire land and progress that project. So, that's it.
Thank you, Bob. Elizabeth?
In theory, I agree with that, but I think until we have a complete accounting of what money has been spent on in the past, I am averse to just handing them another blank check and going, have fun, kids. And I think there are other ways of them getting the money, should the need arise, without just having money sitting in the bank. Having our money, taxpayer money, just sitting there. Because we can do a lot with $500,000 for this town. And just putting it into the bank account of the Affordable Housing Trust in hopes that something shows up, to me, is not good enough. We really need to, I would like to know that it's going to be used for something other than just, maybe more land will pop up for us to buy.
I know we have to be purposeful in what we're looking to do, and I think that's the message I take from all of this, is that it's incumbent upon the trust, the town administration, to articulate and be purposeful about what we're looking to do.
You all set, Elizabeth?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Geez, I go back to the inception of the trust. The leap of faith. I questioned that for a few years, but it got there. There was an acquisition. And hopefully, some of the models that are out there, Yarmouth, Brewster, Chatham, they can be utilized. Those people are more than willing to talk to anybody when it comes to housing. So, all right, is there anything else from the board to the administrator on this subject tonight? That was number 5. How about C4? Any other information that the board needs about that?
Nope.
Hearing none?
Covered.
Thank you very much for attending,
Thank you for having me,
and we'll have a chat at some point.
absolutely, and sorry and thank you, or thank you and sorry, whichever. And good luck, because I know you're about to be in the soup with all the work you do, because we're 181 days away from town meeting. So thank
Okay.
you all again.
Joe, there was one other thing.
You very
We-
kindly allowed me to do the copies of the application, of all the applications, because they have to be distributed to the public. They're online right now. Do you want to add anything that you've, in writing to these before I deliver them out?
What am I allowed to get away with is my question to answer.
Go ahead.
What are your timeframes? And
Now,
October 1st.
I've been waiting. I didn't want, if you wanted to, and give more explanation to, GOP public that's looking through these.
There's gonna be a lot of information. All the information from CPC goes online. So we have a technical wizard on the board that does it all for us, and you can really drill down into it, and there's more coming, but with the applications, the way they stand, as much information as possible, because it truly is the general public that's gonna make a decision
I
on
understand
this.
completely.
That's why we provide as much as we
If
possibly.
I can't get it done shortly, I will delegate it to staff to get it done shortly.
Delegate it to staff to get it done, Shirley, because I know what the other side of that ledger looks like.
But thank you for the forbearance, I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you.
I'm really gonna leave.
All right.
See you in 12 hours. And 45 minutes.
Full
my
business, I don't know what more we can, well, we're gonna, there's already been a discussion about what's going on next on the website.
Right.
I have to meet with the Board of Selectmen. I was supposed to do that yesterday, but I was unavailable. So, what I would like to do is,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
sure, go ahead, John.
I don't recall the discussion we had about what's going on the website.
Oh, okay,
I'm doing it, I don't know what that is.
okay, then I will fill you in when the time's appropriate.
So, can I just have the floor for the?
You have, go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
I don't want to extend this any longer than it needs to be, but I did put all the applications that I had online, such as they are. But the question is, what I haven't put online are the semi-annual reports, which they are in a place where I can just put them online, but I didn't think I had the go-ahead from this group to do that.
You know,
So,
what you're saying now, I'm conflicted with. Those semi-annual reports are for this committee.
Yeah.
so you don't think they're public information?
I'm not saying, they haven't been placed, technically, they haven't been placed on this table, so they're not public information. But, again, I'm just conflicted that
I thought they were more of an internal sort of
it
committee
should be,
thing.
and I could be wrong. What's the pleasure of the board?
Right, that's what I want.
What's the pleasure of the board?
At the assembly level, we're not allowed to have anything that's not public unless it's executive session material.
Okay,
Otherwise, everything we see, the public sees.
okay, on the well, okay, I'm not gonna get into
Due to the
that.
open meeting law for state, and that's state
Kathy?
dictated.
I think that when we had individuals come before us in a public forum and present, and we were able to ask them questions for clarification, that's public. But the stuff that we received was just an update, and we were not able to have a conversation with them, so I don't know if it's really fair to them, the applicants, or us to post that without having all the information.
Okay. Robert?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly a great point.
You know,
'Cause,
clarification, you know.
I mean, and how do you Joe's gonna go back and write a report, but he can't cover everything he went back and forth tonight.
No, that's
You
why,
know,
that's why we have a stenographer in the.
I mean, yeah, and maybe we just should have a policy going forward. Do we have it only reports in person, or do we always have everybody has to submit a written report? I mean, if they're submitting a written report, I do think they should be posted online.
Okay,
I mean, if the verbal back and forth, that's gonna be on film. Go back to YouTube.
okay. Joe,
What's the question?
do you think that all the information that we receive in the updates should be in the public venue, or should that be specifically for the committee members only?
On the updates,
Yeah,
I think they should be online, unless it's too difficult to do. Okay.
no, he can do okay, Carol.
Yeah, I mean, they are public documents, but you know, that doesn't mean they have to be posted online. But I would support posting them online. I think part of it is a convenience to members of this committee, because it's gonna be one accessible place to get them. You know I have, you know, I printed some out, but but maybe going forward, we just want to make sure that the writers of the reports know that they're gonna be posted. Like, you know, make sure you check your punctuation and.
So maybe we should give that the consideration first before we put them online. Notify the folks that are sending us the updates. They are gonna be put online
I
Going
would,
forward.
from this point going forward.
I would think they'd assume that,
Are we
wouldn't
giving
you?
up the in-person reporting?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, but we still get quarterly,
Yeah. No, I mean,
bi-quarterly,
biannual.
biannual.
I mean, I hope we continue to have them in person, because just getting the reports, there was a lot of unanswered questions
Right,
that we
right.
did not get resolved this
No,
year.
it's
But the
just
issue is
leave-
tonight, do we notify all the people who send the biannual reports that they will be going on, their information is gonna be publicized?
I would think,
You'd wanna do that before you do it?
May?
Go ahead.
I don't think you need to do that. I mean, I would maybe just make that a point going forward and let people know. But I don't think that should restrict the group from posting any reports that have been, they're all public documents. So I think that they could easily be posted without any permission or notice. But just as a courtesy, we could just make sure people understand going forward that that's gonna happen.
Okay, well, you know something? I'm gonna put this to a vote. So,
Can I just make one further comment? Somebody said, oh, it's only fair to those who submitted that they have a chance to ask and answer questions. But I think it's only fair to the taxpayers who are funding all these things to have up-to-date information, to see who's spending the money, how they're spending it, and who's not spending the money. And whatever information is provided in these documents is additive. And furthermore, I do believe that once they're posted online, and everybody who's involved in the process knows they're posted online, they're gonna be a little more diligent about what goes up there and what all the taxpayers have an opportunity to see. So I think it's imperative, actually, that we do this.
But what about the ones that don't submit the reports?
Well, then
Then they don't
won't be
get
there,
posted.
and
Well,
there will be a
then
list
maybe some of them
that
don't
Jan
want to
has
get posted.
prepared.
That's not really,
you
That's
can't,
not fair
I'm sorry,
thing
in
either.
government,
they
I
should, I'm
can't
not disagreeing with
imagine
you. What I'm
they
saying
don't
is,
assume it's gonna get, anything
we
they
haven't
sent us
gotten a
is
written
gonna
report
get.
yet from Affordable Housing Trust.
So, can I
Right,
just,
but when we get it, we'll post it.
so, Jan has prepared a document that lists all the outstanding projects, and it's very clearly identified who has not submitted their report, and that should be posted as well. So it's not just that the documents themselves are public, it's the status of the submissions that is also very publicly displayed, and I think all of that is important. And, you know, some people have reasons that we can understand why this hasn't happened, other people maybe don't. But it all has to be out there, and that all is a form of, hopefully, some level of public pressure to sort of step up and do what is supposed to happen here. So, sorry.
Plus, I think
I
it's,
see it
I'm
from a different
convinced
point of
it's the
view.
law.
And I understand the open meeting law, I've been to enough of them, and I have to sign in, and I don't know how many of you at this table have been. I understand the legalese of it. I just have a different point of view. Unless that paper hits this desk, that's not a public document. I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but you can look that up.
What do you, I don't understand what you mean.
What
That
I'm
it has to
saying
be
is-
printed out and placed on paper,
It
that
has-
email
in order
doesn't count?
for it to be accepted as a public document, under the open meeting law, that document has to hit the desk of the chair.
That's not true at all.
Don't say it's not true until you look it up and get
I
it.
just took
I
my
get an
open
opinion on
meeting
it.
law
Like I said,
training.
I don't know how many of you folks have attended those meetings.
I have.
You have attended an the AG's office meeting.
We had 2 presentations to us by the
Okay,
attorney.
so did I.
About open meeting law.
So did I.
That is not true. I'm not even allowed, technically, I shouldn't even,
But you might be
Technically,
under a different guise
it's
than
the
this committee.
state law. Technically, someone's,
so-
anything you do,
The best thing to do in
The
this
public
case,
is
what is the,
public.
what does the board, what's the board want to do?
I'll make a motion that within the next 7 days, the PDF document that Jan prepared that has all the available semi-annual reports be posted on the Harwich Community Preservation Committee webpage on the town website, and also the 1 or 2 or 3 page list of all the outstanding projects and the status of those reports also be posted on the Community Preservation Committee's webpage on the Town of Harwich website.
I
second.
There's a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Okay, so all those in favor?
Can we have a discussion on the
Oh, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right, Bob. Go ahead.
So I just heard that motion that we have the status and the report's been submitted, but not a copy of the reports.
No, may I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Would you like to modify your,
No,
Well, I'd like to clarify my motion, which
Okay.
is, there are 2 PDF files that Jan has prepared. One PDF file includes a copy of every report that has been submitted for this cycle. The other PDF file consists of a list of all the outstanding projects with ones that do not have reports submitted for this cycle clearly identified.
Okay, and that's one single PDF they're all in? I thought there were like many PDFs.
So Jan
Put it in
prepared a single PDF
Has
that
everything.
includes all the available reports.
Okay.
does that satisfy you, Bob?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that existed. I just get lots of individual ones all the time.
Well, by the
And
way,
that's why I I scanned them all and threw them
Okay.
into one PDF.
Okay.
It was too confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else from any of the board members? Hearing none, let's put it to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on. Again, let me get back to,
And Kathy, what you said on this, the list, I'll add in a little bit saying submitted.
Yeah,
And maybe take off the word missing and say
just to
submitted.
clarify.
It's all the rest.
okay, I have to submit a report to the Board of Selectmen on the CPC, the general report for the board. I couldn't make yesterday's meeting. Are any of the board members available Monday, the 15th of November?
That's going to be a long selectmen's meeting, maybe.
Yeah, that's when they're bringing back Chloe's Path, right? So,
Just so you know.
Okay.
That it would be, you'd be late in the,
So I'm going to be into December then, because I'm not going, well, I'm not going to be available. December 6th. So obviously, these are all on a Monday.
so far, so good.
John?
Yeah, my dance card is empty.
Okay. Carol?
Yes, I'm available.
Bob?
yeah, I think so.
Elizabeth?
Yep.
Kathy?
What are you asking?
If, I'm putting it out there that if you want to go to this meeting as a board,
Oh, we have to post it as a board? We have to post it?
I have to post it with them, yes,
Oh, if we're gonna go to it.
right.
I'll pass.
Joe? See you, Joe. Okay, so it's gonna be December 6th.
Yep.
That works. And the other thing is, a couple of the selectmen have stated that they don't want to, the information that all the town boards have submitted, could I have the floor, please?
Oh, sorry.
The information that the town boards have provided them, apparently, they don't want it reiterated on the floor, or it's boring, or something to that effect. They actually use those words. So, usually when I make the presentation to the Board of Selectmen, it's all about numbers. I do the same thing when I go to town meeting. I'm gonna change it up a little bit. And we're gonna have a history lesson. So, for those of you that are coming, popcorn and Coke, or beer, depending on your choice. And that's that. So, does anybody want anything on the next agenda, which is,
18 November, 6 PM here in this room. Be there, be square.
and the projects are going to be?
We're gonna have CH6, which is the adult shared living for disabled and workforce. CH7, which is the Orleans Cape Cod 5 Bank Project, that's what its name is.
Yeah, well,
From
Penrose,
And Harwich Headwaters Drive Bikeways, crossing lights. So those three are what we have.
There's a question I have, and I didn't put it on the agenda because I wasn't sure if I was really gonna bring this up, but the Cape Cod 5 document is so intense, and there are so many eyes on it. Is it still worth to bring to KP Law to have them look it over? Because I'm sure that document's gonna be very expensive. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I think we should, but it's boxed strictly by, you're to look to see if it is eligible to be funded by CPC from Harwich. I don't think we need to look at anything as far as how they're building it and anything else. It's just that whether we have the legal right, that we won't
To
get
be a
into trouble to
participant.
be a participant. That's the extent of the research.
Would you send me an email to that extent, please, and remind me?
Yeah.
Anything from anybody else? Kathy?
Well, I mean, couldn't we just ask our coalition that question rather than seek legal counsel? I mean, there's been other towns that have,
Again, the coalition will not supply any legal document, any argument on either side of a legal document. So,
but if we're just asking whether it's CPA eligible, for one town to, help fund another town's affordable housing thing, I mean.
I just as soon do what Bob did and put it to KP Law.
Yeah, as I recall, we had, the CDP hosted a Zoom about funding regional
Right.
projects. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure that they just came down on a decision about whether Harwich's money can be used for. I mean, they were pretty sure it could, and some people are. Like, we used the money for the veterans home in Dennis. But I just think the way certain people who should know were sort of hemming and hawing, that it would be in our best
Interests.
interest to just have someone tell us directly, you're good to go.
Okay, that makes sense to me. What about the rest of the board? John?
I agree. I feel more comfortable having an opinion from council.
Joe?
Yeah, I agree.
Kathy?
Fine.
Okay. Carol?
Yes, I agree.
All right, then that will take place. That's it?
For the,
Questions from the board? Elizabeth?
well, for the agenda, do we want to, we're still being recorded. Do we want to put a placeholder in either the agenda for the 18th or in December for the answers to the Affordable Housing Trust questions? Or do we want,
I thought he was gonna give us a report on that.
He needs to update the applications too.
yeah,
He needs to give us some estimates, et cetera, et
Oh,
cetera.
yeah, yeah.
and then we're all gonna have questions again, knowing us. So,
I agree.
Good point.
so I'm just thinking in order to let it be known that we are serious about requiring more information, if we were to put it on a
I
future
can
agenda.
send an email to staff tomorrow while it's fresh in his mind. Will that be sufficient?
So are we asking him to come back to us for November 18th? Or are we asking December 6th or 9th?
Probably December, but just make him come. Ask him, please, to come back.
What's the choice, what's the board's pleasure?
December 6th, I think, can ask for
It's
responses.
December 9th, sorry.
Or 9th.
Yeah,
Hold on.
Yep, I'm doing that myself.
I'm
December
conflicted.
6th is when I'm gonna
So
see.
not the 18th of November.
No,
we're saying
December.
December 9th, which is the next meeting,
Okay,
is, December 1st is our own deadline for supporting documentation.
That's on a Wednesday.
right.
So we really need to we need to hold to that deadline. So if he needs to discuss it with us or we need to discuss it with him, we can ask him to come to the December 9th meeting, to come after the other presentations. But we do need to stick to that December 1st deadline, I think.
All right, so that email is gonna say all information by December 1st.
Right, and then
All information.
answer our
All-inclusive.
questions
Although
on the
it would
9th.
behoove the applicant to submit
Beforehand.
information sooner.
Right,
We'll see.
because we've got one in, on the 9th, we'll probably, I don't know if you want to meet early or not, because we have
We have executive
we have
session.
executive
Session
session,
on-
but then the other things don't look,
no, they can be.
they can be timely. They can take time.
I wouldn't,
But-
I would have kept the rec when but he couldn't come, so that's why we had to swap.
We could turn anything into a project if we wanted to.
And we also have December 16th.
Make
For
a meal out of a
follow-ups.
snack.
I understand the 16th, but
Let's schedule for
If
the
we don't have
9th
to meet on
and
the
then
16th, that would be
see.
great, I think.
yes, and I agree
Agreed.
with that, absolutely.
So let's try for the 9th.
Let's do what we can.
But this means that anybody else that we have questions for, like that come up at the November 18th meeting, would also have to get their information to us and be open for a discussion on December 9th. So we might need to prepare for a longer meeting on December 9th, if we don't want to meet on December 16th,
Bob?
which I'm all for.
No, but don't we have November 9th still have presentations?
Yeah, we do.
yes.
So we can't,
We,
No,
and if you
December.
have follow-up for
Yeah.
December 9th, you
Yeah.
have to have them
Okay.
come
So we
back
said
on the
after.
16th.
okay.
Yeah,
The follow-ups for December
December
9th, they'll have their follow-up on December 16th. We're gonna have that meeting probably no matter what.
Not necessarily, maybe we won't
Maybe we won't have any questions.
who's coming,
It all depends on how motivated the board is.
yeah, who's coming on
Carol,
the
go ahead,
9th?
you have the floor.
Well, so just, because I'm new to the process, so these meetings are all about interviews and getting information. And then when and how does the decision process work? Is that a separate, special meeting?
Yes.
All decisions in one meeting?
After
or-
we glean all the applications and get all the questions answered. January, that usually takes place, the voting takes place in January.
At one session?
No, 2 or 3.
Sometimes we have a straw vote,
Yeah.
sometimes we don't.
No, we've gotten away from the straw votes. We don't do that anymore, that's over and done with. That was a previous administration.
Because the warrant,
We fake it,
Right, so it has to be ready by the end of December, January.
yes.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Okay, anything else from the board? My question is, Mr. Parkland, are you gonna be available?
Am I?
Yeah,
When?
every day of your
I'll be
life.
through the rest of the year, yeah,
okay, you are,
yeah.
all right, all right. I have a concern,
No, I'm
but you
sorry.
understand it,
I do.
okay. I won't go any further. All right, anything else from the board? Yes, dear,
On this email, you're gonna send Joe Powers an email tomorrow.
right,
Saying we want the status reports,
yes,
we
ma'am,
want the hand-typed status reports.
yes, ma'am.
And that he has to submit everything by December 1st and provide all follow-up and all additional information.
Tell you
for
what,
this
why don't you put the
application. I knew
report
you were gonna
together
make me do
and I'll
that.
sign it, how about that?
Because
Okay.
you don't have enough to
Thank
do,
you.
I'm sure.
Well, I just thought first time you volunteered, I just wanted to make sure you had it. I'm sad that these are out.
That's okay, that's okay. All right,
Sorry.
Bob.
One more question. You have previously said during our interviewing, when they're explaining the projects, we're not really supposed to express any opinions? Is that, because I caught myself doing that
expressing.
tonight?
I didn't correct anybody tonight. And I should have, but I've got the town administrator in front of me, and he's on the hot seat.
Yeah.
And he's on the hot seat for a long period of time. So if I start correcting the board starts backing up. It's better just to express what you have to express. We have other people in front of us that come in the venue. You may not have that kind of leeway.
Yeah,
But this
civilian.
is really special tonight, and I'm sure you all recognize it. For the questions to be asked that needed to be asked.
Yeah, no, I just, because you usually talk about that
Right,
before every
right.
members and things. You just remind
Well, I
me.
actually had a little discussion with Elizabeth when she started to get off topic a little, but I didn't push it. So, at least I hope I didn't push it.
No, no,
It's
no,
just a
and you
discussion.
were right, and I have way too much tendency to sometimes just assume things, and I did assume that as he's the town administrator and not a civilian from the, conservation committee or something, that it was sort of different. As, that in terms of really getting into things that might show our opinions, as opposed to just being, and what's this? Thank you so much.
Like Kathy, excuse me. Anyway, anything else from the board?
I
all
move
right.
to adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, folks, for your time and your effort.